In 1987, Irem did for shooters what Final Fight did for beat-em-ups. Or so that's what many believe. R-Type was one game that instantly made the name Irem popular with school kids of the time. In R-Type you fly the R9 ship equipped with some awesome firepower. Well, that's if you collect the powered up icons. Without them you have nothing but a pea shooter. With 8 stages to complete, this is one tough game without those powered ups. Many criticize R-Type for being too difficult, and in many cases it can be if you lose your firepower. In fact, it makes Gradius look like a kid's game in that respect. So R-Type was ported to many systems, and we are going to take a look at them in order of release. The very first home port was actually on the PC Engine. This game came on 2 U cards, since at the time PC Engine cards didn't hold enough memory to fit the entire game on. So R-Type was split into 4 levels on each card. The crappy part is that you had to buy both cards to actually have one full game. By the time the game was released in the US a few years later, it was finally able to fit onto one card. So how is the actual port? Well, as you can see, it looks very close to the arcade game. It's very impressive for the 8-bit PC Engine. The only downside is that due to the lower resolution, the game scrolls vertically, which changes the gameplay slightly from the arcade game. Maybe it would have been a better idea to make things a little smaller so that the game didn't have to scroll vertically. Saying that, it isn't a big deal. The audio is also very good, sounding pretty close to the arcade original in many areas. All in, the PC Engine port of R-Type is really good. Just a shame the original Japanese release was split across 2 cards. The second home port of R-Type went to the Sega Master System and was developed by Natsume. We all know that Natsume always provide the goods. Here is no exception. Yes, it's true that this version doesn't look as good as the PC Engine, but the Master System was a weaker console and released 2 years before the PC Engine. This port keeps the correct scrolling style but does suffer from slowdown and quite a lot of sprite flicker at times. Everything looks smaller too, but the core gameplay is intact, and that's what's important. Being that this is the Japanese version, we also get the nice FM audio, which sounds pretty close to the arcade game. A great port to a system that you wouldn't expect to run this game. Here's a rare one. This is the NEC PC88 VA port from Telenet. This version does remind me quite a bit of the Master System port. Like that, it looks more basic than the arcade and PC Engine versions and does feature less colours, but it still plays really well. Something that's quite odd coming from Telenet. Did you know that the MSX also got a port of R-Type and it isn't some crappy ZX Spectrum port? That's right, the MSX port of R-Type is pretty good for the system. Yes, it is jerky as hell, and yes, the colours are not so great, but for an MSX, this is pretty good looking. Sadly, the hitbox on the ship is way too big, meaning that enemy bullets can kill you even though it's clearly not touching you. This can be rather annoying at times. Other than that, this is yet another good port. Developed by Image Designs and the first Western home computer port for the Atari ST. Is it any good like the Japanese versions we've been looking at so far? It should be, since the Atari ST is a 16-bit computer. Well, it isn't. This is a janky piece of shit. Why, you may wonder. It does look good and sounds really good too. Although there are no sound effects unless it's some random button on the keyboard that switches between sound effects and music. It sure wasn't the obvious S or M keys. The big problem with this port is the level design. Did the developers pay any attention to the arcade enemy placements? Did they study how enemies react in the arcade game? I sure don't think so. Another major issue is the collision detection. It's terrible, much worse than the MSX version, because not only do you have a massive hitbox, while many enemies seem to have a smaller one. This results in you clearly shooting something, yet the hit doesn't register. Combine these issues with the choppy scrolling and wobbly moving diagonal bullets, and we have a horrible version of R-Type. Oh, and yeah, attaching and removing the option pod must be done by hitting space on the keyboard. Yeah, that's not going to hinder gameplay, is it? All Western home computer versions are like this. Let's take a look at the ZX Spectrum port. Now this is an interesting one. It tries really hard to be just like the arcade and it kinda succeeds, even though it kind of looks ugly yet still appealing at the same time. The collision detection isn't great, but it's livable. What is good about this port is how well it runs. You wouldn't normally expect the ZX Spectrum to be moving this amount of stuff around the screen at a reasonable pace, but here it is. We even get quite a few different sound effects, although many do sound like a flatulent pig. There are two versions of R-Type for the Amstrad CPC. This is the first of two, and this is the official version, and it's a shambles. This is nothing more than a miserable ZX Spectrum port. No use of colour, no music, and laggy gameplay. Not worth your time. Now while the original Amstrad CPC version was total crap, just check out this amazing remake by Easter Egg, which was released in 2012. It starts off with scenes taken from the PC Engine CD introduction, followed by the main title. First point I noticed was an option screen, something rarely seen on CPC games. We also have a sound test and a choice of music, sound effects, or both. The game graphics are really well done for the CPC, making great use of the hardware. The audio is also excellent and in stereo. We even get 2 button controls. Yes, you fire with one button and shoot off the pod with another. If only developers made use of the CPC back in the day. It could have been number 2 to the Commodore 64 or even number 1 instead of the joke it was seen as. If there was ever a game for Commodore 64 owners to shout about, this is it. This port of R-Type truly shows that the machine was way ahead of the other home micros of the time when it came to games. Developed by Rainbow Arts, we have a fast, smooth playing port with fantastic audio. There's nothing to complain about here. But is it the best Western home port? Remember, we still haven't seen the Amiga version yet, since that was released later than all the other ports. That means it should be the best of the Western ports. Let's wait and see. The next port to be released was for the Sharp X68000. As you'd expect, this is pretty much arcade perfect. It's an amazing port with only one problem. It's too bloody hard. Yes, that's right. The normal setting is brutal while the hard setting is just a nightmare. If you're new to R-Type, you don't want to be playing this port as your first experience. Released a year after the other Western micros came the Amiga version. So is it any better than the Atari ST game? You bet your ass it is, but maybe that's because it was made by the awesome Factor 5. What we have here is a port just as good as the X68000 version. Maybe even better because the level design is more balanced. There are some instances of slowdown and there are parallax effects missing, but overall this Amiga port is really well done. We even have music and sound effects at the same time. It's witchcraft! The next port to be released was for Nintendo's Game Boy. Despite the power of the Game Boy, we still managed to get a pretty good port of R-Type. It may be cut down somewhat, but I think Bits Corporation have done a pretty good job with this one.
に求めるようになっていった。またこの移住計画に伴い宇宙開発は急速に進んでいた。そんなある日、至る所で未確認の宇宙放射線がディスクに記録された。
A year or so after the initial PC Engine release came the PC Engine CD version, known as R-Type CD Complete. This features the exact same game code as the card version, with a new upbeat remix version of the soundtrack and an original opening, ending and in-game cutscenes. These are all pretty lame if I'm to be honest, even for the time. Some people may not like this release due to the changed music, but if you're after R-Type for the PC Engine and want a Japanese version, then this is the one to get. Not happy with just releasing R-Type 1 and 2 on the Game Boy, Bits Corp went ahead and made the Game Boy Color version. Like many Game Boy to Game Boy Color ports, the game has lost a lot of its charm and looks kind of ugly compared to the original. Still, on this cartridge you do get the original Game Boy version of R-Type along with the normal and colored versions of R-Type 2 and a mixed game called R-Type DX. Irem, in an attempt to stay afloat, brought R-Types to the PlayStation. This is a compilation disc featuring R-Type 1 and R-Type 2 ports, as well as a video for R-Type Alpha. This is a pretty solid port that's only let down by a bit slowdown here and there. There's even a mobile Java-based version of R-Type which is pretty cool. Actually, there are a few versions, but as usual the Japanese versions are impossible to get hold of. This Western one by Gyrox is well done. There are a few cuts here and there, but the R-Type experience is retained. This version you are seeing is the demo release. Maybe the full version features sound effects as well. And the final version of R-Type we're going to take a look at is R-Type Dimensions on the Xbox 360. This version of the game was also ported to various other platforms, but we are going to be taking a look at this one. So what we have here is an excellent remake of R-Type, with the ability to switch back and forth between new and original graphics in real time. It really is quite unique, and something I wish many updated games would allow. We can also choose many graphical filters and even some crazy screen mode that tilts everything to a diagonal perspective. And let's take a look at all those versions of R-Type running side by side.